Greetings, everybody, and welcome. It is Sunday again, and here we are gathering for our Sacred Sunday Sit, as we call it. My name is Jessica Mingus. I am the executive director of CMC and have the joy of welcoming back our dear Vera Ruangtragool, who will be teaching us today. Many of you CMCers who have been here for a while remember that Vera was regularly teaching our Sangha on Wednesday evenings. And it is always a treat when we get to welcome her back for a Sunday. So, in just a moment, I will be passing things over to her to guide us in a meditation. But before that, just a couple of matters of housekeeping so everyone knows what we have to look forward to today in our practice. So, first, just a quick overview of how our session will work. So Vera will guide us in a meditation of about 20 minutes. That usually wraps up around 11 o'clock Eastern, so 20 to 25 minutes of sitting. Then we take a pause to reflect on Dāna together, the Pali word for generosity. And then we have our teaching. And so every week, every month, we always have a theme. And last week, we started our theme of the 10 perfections, the Pāramīs. So Vera will be continuing to support our exploration of those 10 perfections. And we will be thinking about what it means to live our life in alignment with our values. What does it mean to live a virtuous life? Um, so at 11:45, about 15 minutes before the formal end of our practice, we always open up the comments. So throughout the day today, if you have questions or reflections that you want to share with the community or for Vera's response, we welcome those. And at 11:45, I will start to read those out to Vera for her response. And then at 12, when we close our formal practice, we continue with small breakout groups. So if you haven't ever stayed with us before, we really encourage you to. You'll get to meet with perhaps four members of the Sangha. Everybody comes off mute, and then you can continue to be in discussion and reflection with some members of our community. And as a gentle reminder, we always encourage you to speak from the I. So rather than seeking to fix or respond to challenges that your Sangha mates are sharing, the goal is really for us to listen to each other deeply and with care, and really to stay oriented on how the teachings for today and how everyone else's reflections are landing and settling for each of us. So that's the invitation for our breakout groups. And then we always like to also just start our time together by first of all greeting each other. So if you are on camera, please join me in just giving a wave and a smile to our Sangha. And I always like to look for a new face that I haven't seen before or a new name. And for those of you who might not be on camera, just know that you have all of us smiling and waving at you, welcoming you here to the community. And take a moment now also if you'd like to let us know where you're tuning in from. So our guiding teacher, Bart Van Mellick, always likes to call this our mini retreat, our 90 minutes together on Sundays. So where is your mini retreat this morning? Where are you practicing from? And I will read out a couple of those to the group. For anyone that is fairly new to CMC, what is special about us being mostly virtual is that we have practitioners from all over the US and from many other parts of the world that come and join us each week. So it's something that makes it really special to be able to connect in this way. And today, so we have folks. Oh, so someone, Gretel from Panama City. So that is a first for us. Welcome. Um, Jane from a misty Brooklyn Heights. We have Patty in a quiet corner of Connecticut. Many friends on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, the home base of CMC. Judith in the Netherlands. We have friends in Atlanta. Hi, Erin, upstate New York. Wonderful. So, welcoming you all, and Bettina in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Debbie in Washington, D.C. So, thank you all for joining us. And dear, dear Vera, I am so happy that you're here with us today. We are really looking forward to your wisdom and your teaching. So, hello.
Morning, good moment. So happy to be here again as well and to see all of our faces ready for practice. And so, as Jessica mentioned, we'll start our practice today with some meditation. And the topic for today is the second of the Pāramīs. Um, in in Buddhism, we call that perfections or qualities that we develop to help us move towards greater awakening. Right? So, Sīla is this um, practice of cultivating virtue, right? And we'll talk all about it in our reflection after the meditation. But I just wanted to start us off with a practice that the Buddha uses to help us in meditation, and it's related, right? So this practice is called, um, in Pali, the language of the Buddha's time, Sīla Nusati, right? It's the remembrance or the recollection of virtue, right? So it's thinking about all of the good deeds that we've done, um, whether recently, in the past, and really making it a practice, right? And so he brings this up because it is deeply related to bringing ease to the mind and to the body, right? There's this one passage where Ananda, the Buddha's assistant, asks the Buddha, so what is the reward and blessing of wholesome morality, of Sīla? Right? And the Buddha responds, freedom from remorse. And then he goes on to talk about how, because of um, our cultivation of good deeds, virtues, we have this sense of freedom from remorse, from guilt. And then he goes on to say, okay, so Ananda asks, so then what's the reward or blessing from freedom of remorse? He goes on to say joy, right? And then there's a whole cascade where it goes from joy to the sense of, you know, this energizing, joyful quality. Then it goes to tranquility, to happiness, to concentration, to the ability to see things as they are, the ability to detach and let go, all along the line up until total freedom from clinging, right? So this practice of thinking about the good can be something, if it's helpful for us to ease the mind, we can do that for our practice. But really, anything that can help us bring ourselves to this moment in a more relaxed and easeful way. Right. So maybe it's just even starting with the physical check. How is your body existing in this very moment? Right, so if you're seated, you can invite the body to rest back in a comfortable posture. Is there any tightness or holding anywhere in the body? If we notice anything, we invite in a little softness, a sense of release. giving the body, the mind, the space, and the time to start to settle down gradually. All right, so really take our time. There's no rush even to close the eyes. Noticing the sense of presence in the space we're in. Collecting, recollecting what is good. If you can reflect on any good deed, big or small, that you've done, whether it's recently or further back in the past. If you're able to connect to one, just notice how it makes you feel to think back on that good deed that you did. Just noticing the feeling within. Maybe there's a sense of joy, satisfaction. The mind is at ease knowing that you did what was helpful. And if it feels a little challenging to think of a good deed that you've done, just know that the fact that you are here is a beautiful and huge good deed that you're doing right now. The fact that you dedicated time, set aside all of your usual responsibilities to take care of yourself, to take care of the mind, the heart, with this practice. What a beautiful blessing it is. If you'd like, you're welcome to start your practice with some intentional breaths. Allowing the breath to flow down into the belly if possible. And slowly release out. Breathing in deeply. Breathing out slowly. Breathing in nice and long. Breathing out relaxingly. Feeling the body breathing, releasing. Letting it slow down bit by bit. Anytime during our practice, we are very welcome to come back to this practice of thinking of what is good, tuning back into the breath with some intentional breaths. Anytime we need to release, to be more at ease. We're doing any practice that allows the heart, the body to lighten, to open up to this moment bit by bit. Taking intentional breaths for as long as you'd like, as long as it's helpful. And then allowing the breath to come back to its normal, natural rhythm. And just resting with the breath as it is. Tuning in to the feeling of the body breathing, existing in this space. Not having to be anywhere else, do anything else, achieve anything else. Continuing to release, soften, and rest. Checking the usual places of holding in the body. If you've closed the eyes, just let the eyelids be light and soft. Checking the jaw. Letting it be loose. The shoulders relaxed. The belly soft. The legs relaxed. Easing into this very moment as it is. And when the body and the mind feel more calm and at ease, more present, you can rest your attention within you on anything comfortable, easy. Maybe it feels easy to just sit with this feeling of relaxedness, with ease. Or maybe it's easy to connect with the feeling of the breath at a certain point, anywhere you notice it most. Maybe it's easy to connect with visual image, like the image of light within you, brightness, spaciousness. Anything at all that helps you to rest the mind calm and still, comfortable and relaxed. And then just gently coming back anytime the mind has drifted elsewhere. Easy and neutral. Resting here with relaxed awareness. Continuing to maintain the mind calm and relaxed and present within you.
Thank you so much, Vera, for that beautiful start to our practice today. Before Vera continues with her offering, the second part of her offering, we always take a moment to reflect on Dāna, the Pali word for generosity. And I often like to read this community poems and excerpts of books that I find that resonate with me on any given day. So I have been on a bit of a poetry binge, so I will continue in that vein with a lovely poem about generosity by Alberto Rios. So I'll read that to you all. Here it goes. One river gives its journey to the next. We give because someone gave to us. We give because nobody gave to us. We give because giving has changed us. We give because giving could have changed us. We've been better for it. We've been wounded by it. Giving has many faces. It is loud and quiet, big though small, diamond in wood nails. Its story is old, the plot worn, and the pages too. But we read this book anyway, over and again. Giving is, first and every time, hand to hand, mine to yours, yours to mine. You gave me blue, and I gave you yellow. Together we were simple green. You gave me what you did not have, and I gave you what I had to give. Together we made something greater from the difference. That was by Alberto Rios. So, in a moment, I will share information about ways to contribute to CMC because that particular form of generosity is the kind that really has sustained this community for so many years and continues to. So, if you are in a position to contribute, we would be grateful. But we never want the reflection on generosity and our capacity to give to stop there. So we encourage you to take a moment and reflect on these very small but important acts of generosity that we can offer each other. And it can be something as seemingly insignificant as a warm greeting to someone that you pass on the street, or holding a door open for someone, or helping somebody carry a bag or two up and down the stairs of the train. There are so many ways to be generous, and all of them in combination amount to so much. So grateful to all of you for being here. Grateful to you for taking this time to cultivate and nourish yourself in this way and to be such a special part of this community that we all value so much. Dear Vera, looking forward to your teaching. Thank you again for being here with us.
Thank you, Jessica. And thank you all for your practice, for your presence, and all the forms of generosity um, that you've given to be here together and to make this community a thing. Right. So happy to be here to talk about the different qualities that move us towards awakening. Right? So I'll focus on the second virtue known as Sīla. Right? So this is all in the context of all the various factors that the Buddha taught that move us towards awakening. What's known in the Theravada Buddhist tradition as the 10 perfections or the 10 Pāramīs in Pali, the language that was used at the Buddha's time. Right. So last week, Bart explored the quality of generosity. And so now we're looking at the training of virtue, of ethical conduct. And you'll hear me use the word Sīla, during this talk, right? But just know that, it has many translations, um, such as ethical living, discipline, restraint. And this practice is considered to be a foundational step on the spiritual path. Um, in the Buddhist tradition, the foundation upon which the entire Eightfold Path is built. And here in the West, the practice of ethical conduct sometimes tends to be overlooked or glossed over, in favor of delving directly into meditation practice. Right? And yet, we can see that the day-to-day actions are what contribute to the thoughts, feelings, and emotions that arise in the mind. Right? You can find that in our meditation, right? Whatever's happening during our day, the actions that we've done, the actions that we might do, it's all swirling around in there, right? So Sīla, this ethical living, is so important for our meditation practice as well, because when we practice it, the mind over time becomes naturally more joyful and at ease. It's very difficult to calm the mind when we're troubled by the consequences of our actions, right? Or on the flip side, it feels very easy to be at ease when we know we've done the right thing, right? So Sīla are trainings that improve the quality of our inner life and are principles that can help guide our actions to bring more harmony within oneself and then between ourselves and others. And the word often used with Sīla is precept, but I know that this word often carries a certain connotation in the Western psyche, right? Of it kind of being like a type of commandment, where if you break it, it's this big thing, you might feel great shame. And, maybe bringing strong feelings of good and evil, right? But in the Buddhist practice of it, Sīla is a way of behaving that we ourselves choose, right? It's a code of conduct that we choose to undertake to prevent us from doing harm to ourselves and others. And we understand that some actions lead to suffering and some actions lead to happiness and freedom. And so we voluntarily take it on by ourselves, not because some authority figure told us to, but willingly out of that clear understanding and conviction that, this is good for our well-being as well as for society. Right? For the sake of a steady mind, a free and clear conscience, right? This sense of peace of mind and the sense that we're doing no harm externally. What's interesting is when a lay person, so a non-monk, non-monastic person, goes to a Buddhist temple, at least in the Thai Theravada context, one of the traditional practices is for that lay person, like myself or any one of you, to go to the monks and to request to uphold the 5 basic precepts. Right? So you would go to the monk, and then you would recite a certain passage in Pali to actually request to observe these precepts, right? And if you go to a Thai temple, you're here, Ma yang pante wisung rakanataya, da, 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 right? And you don't just repeat it once, you repeat it twice, you repeat it 3 times, so that the monks are sure that you wish to uphold these precepts, right? And then, the monks acknowledge it, and then you go on to recite each of the 5 precepts in Pali, one by one. The monks are there to witness it, give their blessing for that wholesome intention to be fulfilled. Right? So it's actually a voluntary undertaking. And so what are these 5 precepts or trainings that serve as a basic moral code of conduct to reduce harm? They are 1, refraining from killing or harming living beings. 2, refraining from taking what isn't given. 3, refraining from engaging in harmful sexual behaviors, sexual misconduct. 4, refraining from false speech. And this also includes divisive, harsh, or frivolous speech. And then 5, refraining from taking any intoxicants that cloud the mind. So as you hear this, you might think, wow, this is pretty relevant, right? These are practices that could be a universal code of conduct, not relevant just for Buddhists, but for anyone who wishes to live with each other in peace and harmony. In fact, upholding these 5 basic principles is said to ensure a basic level of peace in the world. And the Dalai Lama talks about how peace in the world depends on peace in the hearts of individuals, right? And to achieve real and lasting peace, we need to establish peace in our hearts and to resolve the inner conflicts that are, manifested outward and create these larger conflicts with each other. So that's why my teacher, Lumpot Tamachayo's motto is world peace through inner peace. Right? Because this practice of Sīla is a basic step to reduce inner conflict. And then, as we practice, it reverberates outwards in the form of more peaceful interactions starting with those closest to us, right? Our family, our loved ones, our neighbors, those in our communities, our town, our city, country, region, and then all around the world. It's going to take a lot, but it starts here. And so why, in addition to world peace, is this practice of ethical conduct so important? Why is it a foundation for our spiritual journey and for, this sense of stability and harmony in society? So the Buddhist monk Ajahn Amaro has said that a life without Sīla is like a car without brakes. And to better understand this, it can be helpful to understand the effect of harmful actions on the mind. So in the Buddhist teachings, harmful actions come about when we're motivated in some way by greed, also known as desire, hatred, and delusion. These are the 3 main poisons, so to speak. And when you add along with it all of its cousins, right, like fear, jealousy, arrogance, negligence, and many more, all of these things can cloud the mind and our judgment and cause us to think and speak and act in ways that, whether we know it or not, cause suffering to oneself and to others. And this is based on the understanding, right, that the Buddha talked about the nature of how we are, is that the mind is naturally luminous with a brightly shining nature, but it's colored by all the different visitors, so to speak, that come to visit. Right? And these visitors are often called defilements. And we also hear about it in the form of afflictions. And I like this word afflictions because it really gives us the sense that, while we are afflicted when we're under the influence of craving, aversion, when we don't really understand something, and we're feeling unhappy, distressed, and pained in some way, right, by that situation. And so in Buddhist terminology, these factors obstruct the mind, right? They darken it because they cause us not to see the reality of a situation clearly. So when we perform actions that cause harm in some way, whether, to ourselves or to others, we often have regrets or guilt that make the mind, less clear. They causes it to feel more restless, uneasy, and disturbed. And then on the flip side, when we refrain from doing actions that cause harm, we are freed from these causes of regrets, guilt, or anxiety, right? Our conscience is clear. The heart is lighter, the mind is more spacious, maybe it feels more stable, and it feels easier to rest more calm and still. So, Sīla is so important because it allows us to return to this sense of basic goodness, right? Not allowing it to be overpowered by these visiting forces like greed, hatred, and delusion. Buddha also talked about the many gifts one first gives when we ourselves cultivate virtues. And he says that the one who cultivates virtues gives freedom from danger, freedom from animosity, freedom from oppression to limitless numbers of beings. And from this, a peace of mind is born. What the Buddha calls bliss from blamelessness. And there's this one sutta teaching where it goes, and which is the bliss of blamelessness? There's the case where the disciple of the noble ones is endowed with blameless bodily action, blameless verbal action, blameless mental action. And thinking, I'm endowed with blameless bodily action, blameless verbal action, blameless mental action. One experiences bliss, experiences joy. This is called the bliss of blamelessness. Some of the other, blessings that the Buddha talks about from this practice of Sīla is one being that our wealth will increase. We'll have good fortune. Another is we'll have a good reputation, as well as we'll be able to gain confidence and be at ease in any society. Another one is by practicing virtues, we will have a serene death, right? Having lived without guilt, remorse, or fear of the consequences of our actions. And lastly, after passing, we'll be reborn in a happy state, a heavenly world. Right? So, because we practice doing no harm, practicing Sīla gives the gift of protection to ourselves and to others. And it allows for the possibility of cooperation, peaceful coexistence, and harmony internally and externally. And I really want to take some time to talk about this sense of harmony. And so living in alignment is something that has made me think about Sīla in a more deep way, right? Thinking about it as living in a way where our thoughts, our speech, and actions match up. So harmonizing our intentions and then the actions of the speech and of the body, right? Because we can actually feel it. When what we think, say, and do are in sync, we feel at ease. There's internal coherence. And when they don't match up, we don't feel good. right? There's this sense of internal conflict. So think about all the times, for example, we've procrastinated on something. We tell ourselves, oh, I need to get to that. I need to respond to that email, to that text. Um, I need to declutter all of these piles that have, started piling up around everywhere. Oh, I need to get my annual health checkup. Right? And you might even get to a point where you tell yourself, okay, I'm going to take care of this over the weekend. Great. Now, what happens when you put off that task you thought to yourself you needed to do? Or, you even got to the point where you told yourself, okay, I'm going to do this. The task, for whatever reason, let's say it gets put on the back burner. But even though we put it on the back burner, it still stays in the mind. Right? And let's say, okay, this doesn't just happen once, but twice, a few times, a few more times, and maybe it's now indefinite. And what if we do this with multiple things? And when we tell someone else, oh, we'll do something, and then we don't, you might sense a sense of discomfort, right? And a sense of unease arising within us. Like when we don't do what we say or when we don't do what we think or say we'll do, it can feel like we're deceiving ourselves and also maybe others. And we're not following through with our word. And this can cause experiences of anxiety, of guilt, of regret, this lingering stress. So, generally speaking, I consider myself doing pretty well with my Sīla, upholding the 5 precepts. But then something that blew my mind was when a monk friend, Venerable Nick, and maybe some of you here at CMC have met him in the past. He shared that he himself considered not following through with our own word, especially to ourselves, in addition to our word with others, right, as not fully practicing the 4th precept of false speech. I try not to lie, but when he talked about it in this way, I was like, oh, wow, this is an opportunity to really look into all the times when I don't follow through with my own intentions, right, as a way to further practice and train from this, with this training of refraining from false speech. Trying to be more honest with myself by doing as I say. And I've shared here at CMC before, I've been addicted to these games on my phone. Right? It used to be one game, but now it's two, full disclosure. I found myself, more often than not, very late at night, just saying to myself, okay, just one more game and then off to bed. Right? Well, that one more game usually ends up being not just one more game, but, many, many games after. Right? And I don't feel good afterwards. I go to bed late. I feel like I wasn't true to my word. I'm feeling judgy about myself or lacking discipline. Right? But when I'm more mindful and I remember this teaching of training to be more true to my word, what I've started to do is uh, in that moment, when I tell myself one more game, I have to verbally say to myself, okay, Vera, one more game actually means one more game, okay? Even if I lose, that's it for tonight. I will have to put my phone down and then prepare for bed, okay? Right. And with that, I, start to mentally prepare myself for that, to detach, to, put my phone down. And all the while extending grace and compassion, especially when it doesn't end up being just one game. So there's a Pali word called Sīla Dhamma, which translates to a norm of virtue or noble behavior. And you may have heard Venerable Barin in the past talk about how our teacher, Lumpata Machiyo, refers to meditation practice as a noble resting time. So I love this translation of Sīla practice as noble behavior. Right? And by doing so, we are cultivating ethical integrity by doing no harm, or more realistically, doing less harm, right, to ourselves and others. So the more that we can really tune into this and refrain from harmful acts, even the smallest ones, we live with more dignity and become someone we respect. So this is the confidence that the Buddha was referring to as one of the blessings from practicing ethical conduct. So, I know that, the CMC community, a lot of folks have heard a lot about ethical conduct over the years. And you may have heard the practice of Sīla framed as cultivating compassion, generosity, responsibility, honesty, mindful consumption. I thought it was personally helpful to also make the distinction between, on the one hand, refraining from harmful actions and then cultivating the opposite positive quality. All right, so we can see this as two parts. The first being we need to restrain the factors that inhibit, our sense of compassion. And then secondly, cultivate those factors that are conducive to compassion. Right? So in order to be able to add beautiful things into our life, we need to cut out the unsupportive things that are holding us back first. Right? And to ensure a smoother journey, right, we fill up all the potholes in the mind first. And then, secondly, and very importantly, we then do the work of traveling down the path and cultivating those skillful qualities, moving us more towards awakening. Right? So I see this as two separate but very intertwined practices. Right? Something that came to my mind was the image of, let's say, a glass of water. So imagine, I don't know, I have this little thing. Imagine this was filled with a glass of water. And let's say to this glass of water, you're adding sand, right? You're adding glitter. Glitter are the positive things, supportive things in your life. Sand is the negative, unhelpful things. And we're at the same in our life adding both glitter and sand, right? And as that's going on, you start to notice, oh, we got a lot going on in here, right? Things are starting to get a little muddied, right? You have the beautiful sparkliness of the glitter. Imagine it's all in here, and you have the sand, and it's all just kind of mixed together. You can't really separate the two. But let's say we work on taking away the sand, the harmful actions that are affecting the mind. And you start to see, oh, okay, it's starting to not crowd up the space anymore. I start to see there's more room for us to add more glitter. You start to notice and experience more of that sense of ease, sense of positiveness in your life. Right? So to think about it also, not just cultivating generosity, cultivating compassion, but what are the things that we're doing that inhibit that? And can we work on smoothing those out bit by bit? So we can look at this as being about refining our practice. I know I personally, I'll speak with through my own experience that sometimes I see it as like all or nothing, right? But instead of it being all or nothing, what might refining our practice look like? If full abstention from doing harm isn't possible, and this is, of course, after we've exhausted all other options to not do harm, then perhaps we can think of it in terms of a reduction of harm. Right? And I want to emphasize that little actions matter, right? Both skillful and unskillful. So, like in college, when I was living in the dorms, right, people would take all sorts of things, right? Ketchup bottles, all the condiments, spoons, anything that was out on the communal tables. And they would say, oh, it's just a little thing. No one will care. School is rich, right? They have my tuition dollars. It has enough. And then I see the same behavior with people taking things from my mom's restaurant, right? There are a few dishes that she will use ceramic plates and metal cutlery for, right? That she offers to the customers, and that they're supposed to return, but somehow they always go missing. And they probably have the same mentality. And it's such a little thing, it doesn't matter. They're not going to notice. Right? But what we see is that these little habits grow into more ingrained habits and then translate into actions with bigger consequences. Right? We start to see no issue with taking advantage of others, taking advantage of a situation, committing fraud, right? Like all these steps leading to bigger consequences. All stemming from this attitude of, it's a little thing, it doesn't matter. Right? So this is an invitation, especially if we've heard this talk about ethical conduct over and over and over, to look more deeply into areas of our life where we might have this attitude of, it's just a little thing, it doesn't matter, or it doesn't matter that much. And pay attention to the justifications we give when we do an action that might be unskillful. Like, oh, well, there's a whole bunch of ants here. If I don't get rid of these ants, more will come, right? So I got to get rid of them. I got to kill them, right? They must die. This mosquito feasting on my arm, gone right now. So, this really requires a pause from our usual reflexes to be a little bit more resourceful, right? Are there ways I can get around killing, right? What are some non-lethal arrangements? And are there ways that I can prevent this from coming up more often? Right? Right? Maybe it's making sure that we don't have these things for them to feast on, right? Like the little ants. So what's interesting is, lay people, like regular non-monastic folk like us, are invited to uphold the five basic precepts. But on the other hand, Theravada Buddhist monks, they have to uphold 227 precepts. And that's a lot. And there was one day where I was talking to this monk at our temple in Thailand, and he shared how these 227 precepts basically just cover the five basic precepts, but in greater detail, right? So, there's additional rules, of course, on living, on food, clothing, social behavior. But there's over these 200 precepts that are practices to further refine their behavior, like ways to practice doing less harm. Right? So just really looking at this as, okay, how are there any ways I can focus on these little things, on refining my actions in one moment, in 2 moments, right? With one thing, with two things, and working on that. And so, a question that uh, might come up is, how do we determine whether an action is wholesome or unwholesome? So this often comes up in talks about karma, right? So in determining the effect of an action, karma, and whether it's considered wholesome or unwholesome, Buddhist ethics considers three parts. First is the intention that motivates the action. Second is the effect the doer experiences as a result of the action. And third is the effect others experience as a result of that action. Right. So, there's a lot going on here. So, we're looking at whether an intention is rooted in positive mental qualities like love, compassion, um, wisdom, or if it's rooted in negative ones like hatred or selfishness. We're also looking whether, this action that the doer does helps them become more compassionate or less selfish, or if the outcome by this action is negative and unpleasant for the doer. We're also looking at whether the receiver also receives a positive result or experiences an undesirable one. Maybe that action causes them to become more hateful or selfish. So there's a lot of parts here, but overall it's considering the intention and then the impact to both the doer and the receiver. Right. So when we really look at all of these factors, it is so complex and so hard to fully understand all of the elements involved. And it can be overwhelming. Right? But the thing is, we can do what we can with the knowledge we currently have. We examine our intentions, we pay closer attention to the effect of our actions on ourselves, on others. We learn from our mistakes. We vow to refrain from doing them in the future, and then just keep refining our practice in this way. And a practice to help us gauge whether an action is helpful or harmful is to practice tuning more and more into the subtle feelings of ease and discomfort within us, both mentally and physically. Right? So tuning into what the body and the mind are quietly signaling to us. Right? So, are we feeling a sense of dis-ease? Are we feeling a sense of lightness, spaciousness? Um, we feel no remorse, right? And I bring this up also because sometimes we might think, well, why is it that, that person, you know, doing all these terrible deeds, terrible, right? They seem to be doing well. And so we might start to doubt the effect of our good deeds, right? Or good deeds in general. Because we're not able to see the full picture, we might not have the complete perception about this practice of ethical conduct. Some people might say, well, if that person got away with it, then what does it matter? And if you've ever found yourself thinking this and feeling, maybe at times hopeless about whether good actions matter, you're not alone. Right? Just to be reminded that your actions do matter, big and small. I came across this passage from the Thai monk Ajahn Chah, and these words really comforted me. He says, "A life that is established on a foundation of goodness will shine brilliant and supreme. We needn't worry that any good we do will be wasted. Even after we die, the virtue we have created will remain in the world. This is something we can observe. Virtue does not die. Our children can carry it on, and when others meet our children or see anything that was connected with us, they will think about us and feel happy. In this way, we are still giving refuge and assistance to others in the world. So, if the question, what's the right thing to do? If that feels very complex and doesn't resonate as much, perhaps we can reframe it in a different way. One question could be, does this action lead to increased suffering or increased happiness for myself and others? Or maybe this question from Stephen Batchelor, could be helpful. What's the compassionate thing to do? And just with all of this, the invitation to also extend compassion and grace to ourselves as we practice, as we transgress, as we make mistakes, as we pick ourselves up, as we make amends, we try again. And a powerful practice is forgiveness of our misdeeds. Because we can be racked up with a lot of guilt, right? A lot of shame. But something to think about, right? Both the act of ourselves forgiving, maybe it's forgiving ourselves and also forgiving others, and then the act of asking for forgiveness from others. So I just want to share really quickly something that happened to me just, I think, last week. The big news in my family is that one of my sisters is now pregnant with a baby boy. And when we found out about it, I called my mom to check in with her. As we were talking, I ended up sharing some unsolicited opinions about how not to raise the child in the traditional patriarchal way, right? That was used in raising the boys in the family. So, this came out of nowhere from my mom, and as you might guess, did not land very well with her. I mean, who wants to be accused of bad parenting, right? But I realized this after the words came out. And I meant what I said, but, I wasn't as tactful about it. So, I heard her become sullen. I hung up. And then all the rest of the evening, oh man, I was afflicted by this, unwise speech with my mom, her feeling upset, and this affected me, distracting me with my phone even more, right? Going to bed late, waking up still afflicted. And then I took some time to reflect. And then after eating some humble pie, I made the decision to apologize to her. First in my mind, right? Okay, I'm gonna apologize to her. And let me tell you the sense of relief I got the moment I made that decision, right? Not even having done it yet, but right, just even thinking, okay, I'm in the wrong, I'm gonna apologize. And it felt even better when I actually apologized and knew that my mom didn't hold that unwise action against me. Right? So there's something very powerful if we can acknowledge the things that we've done and do things that allow us to make amends, to release. And even if the other person doesn't respond the way that we do, just know that that resolve to do what is right in the future is huge. And then extending compassion and grace to us as we move bit by bit. Right? And this is all gradual, right? And really, when we see how hard it is to change others, well, first, to change ourselves, we can realize how hard it is to allow others to change. And so just focusing on the things that we do have agency over, which is our own thoughts, our own speech, and then our own actions. Right. So there's a lot of content out there that we could discuss, but I'm gonna leave this as my offering for today and open it up to this wise community. Right. You all have shared and have been so helpful for me in my practice. And I'd love to open it all up for any of you to reflect your sharings, your experiences, and maybe thinking about how refining your practice of ethical conduct might look like, right? What helps you to live in alignment, right, with your thoughts, speech, and actions? And what are some challenges? We all have them. So opening it all up to you if anyone has any thoughts to share. Thank you all.
Mm. Thank you so much, Vera, for that wonderful offering. And we already had some questions and reflections and some chuckles in the chat here. So I will start with what Cheryl had um, to offer. She said, aging, I feel false speech is promising too much to myself or others, more than the energy I have. It's a relief to slow down, more compassionate.
Well said, Cheryl. Right. I feel like that kind of gets to be more realistic with our situation, right? And being true to ourselves, being true to the energy that we have, being true to our resources that we can offer. Yeah, so very well said.
And Grethel asked, what happens when telling the truth is something that would hurt the other person?
Yeah, great question, Grethel. So the Buddha talks a lot about this under the heading of wise speech. And one of the things that he brings up is, even if it's true, is it the right time? Right? Is it appropriate to say in that moment? Right? So let's say you see them kind of upset, right? Like my mother, right? She wasn't upset before, but um would bringing this up that, I thought she was raising my brother, or she raised my brother in various ways that were not helpful. You know, to me, that's the truth, right? But was she ready to hear that? Right? Was she in an agitated state? Right? So, really thinking about the circumstances and the conditions that, you know, would facilitate the other person to receive that truth a little bit more easily, right? Or as easily as you think is possible for you in that moment, right? But it is a very rich area of practice, right? Also, is that truth going to actually be beneficial for them? Is it going to help them in any way? Or is it going to elicit, a strong defensive reaction? Right. So really looking more deeply into the effect that could have, and seeing if we could be more tactful, or finding the right moment or the right words to make it more receptive.
Rochelle shared, I often feel guilt for not doing enough good. I easily forget that not causing suffering is often just as important, not gossiping or scowling at others, etc.
That's a great distinction. Right? And And that's one of the reasons I bring up this distinction. And the Buddha talks about the really important quality of not harming, right? Not just actively, doing something um, that's helpful to the other person, but the fact that you are not harming, that is a gift of protection, right? A true gift. If we just do that, right, at the very least, there will be a sense of peacefulness, right? So know that it is huge, and that you are doing something so special by not affecting others in that harmful way.
Naomi had a powerful question. Um, she asked, how can I deal with lingering remorse from prior harmful actions?
So relevant. Yeah. I think this is where a lot of grace and compassion can come in, and understanding that are we did what we could in that moment with the resources that we had, right? If we knew better at that moment, we would have done better, right? But I think it's accepting that at that moment we didn't know, and we were working with, our resources at that time, our limits, our capabilities. And so extending a sense of grace and um, forgiveness for ourselves, right? And just know that, the past is the past. I mean, it's easy to say, right? Yeah, the past is the past. But to know that that resolve to not do it again in the future is also meaningful. And that for you to learn from that means that you had that experience to learn from, and that can be its purpose, right? That had you not known or done that thing that you felt remorse about, that would not have stopped you from doing it in the future, right? So because we had that experience, if we can, with ourselves, grace and compassion, and then use that as a teaching moment, um, I think that can be helpful, right? But bit by bit, it's hard, right? To first admit that we didn't do the right thing, that we aren't, you know, that we're not the Buddha yet. We're not fully awakened. So of course we're gonna do all of these things that, because we didn't know better, because of, you know, what the Buddha calls the defilements, right? Greed, hatred, and delusion. Um, Even the monks who were with him practicing, yes, they had so many actions that they did. Some of them were gangsters, some of them were murderers, right? And so they had to deal with all of these things that they did in the past. And so the practice is to really focus on the actions now, forgive yourself for what you did, see where we can make amends, see where we can do things differently in the future, and know that each thing that you do is setting yourself up on that smoother path.
Susan shared, well, first of all, she said this was beautiful and continued, I learned so much and feel possibilities for growth. You ended by saying we can, quote, have agency over our own thoughts. My experience is that I often cannot, but I can use my practice to watch and detach from them. Do you have agency over your own thoughts?
Great question. And I think this is a practice where mindfulness is at the foundation of all of this, right? And when we have mindfulness to see and be able to, as you are practicing, use your practice to watch and detach from them, This helps us to see more clearly which thoughts that do come up. And it can seem like it's uncontrolled, right? We're not willing them to come up. But there's going to be thoughts that come up that when we kind of sit back and can see more clearly, we can see, okay, these thoughts are more helpful for my practice, more helpful for bringing ease to the heart, peace to the mind. And these other kind of thoughts, aren't really. They're making me more restless, they're making me more anxious. And so the thing is, we practice with mindfulness to discern what's helpful and not helpful. And then here's where, the sense of agency comes over. We can choose which kind of thoughts we follow, right? So if you're sitting and you're, this line of thought, right? Like instead of thinking about, let's say you're thinking about all of the things that didn't go right, right? If we notice that, we can think, oh, okay, these other thoughts of thinking about things that are going well, right? Things that are good, my good deeds, that seems to make me feel better, right? What if I start to practice more of this line of thinking, right? And then as you practice, you notice how you feel, right? Tuning in, it's like, oh, okay. And then how do I feel during my meditation practice? So all of this is intertwined and is helpful, right? The Buddha didn't took that extra step of saying to dwell the mind in things, you know, positive mental qualities of like loving kindness, compassion, things like that, when we can discern what's helpful or not helpful. Thanks for that question.
Mm. There's so much richness in the chat, and I regret that I won't be able to share everyone's comments. They are all just so thought-provoking and so supportive. Um, I will read one last comment from Rose, and then we will start to close for today. So Rose said, "This is so helpful, Vera. Thank you. My work environment feels like a place of deep organizational dysfunction. There's a history of disregarding and disrespecting its people, and that has led to a culture with a lot of unresolved hurt and unwholesome action and speech. Listening to you, I understand that a lot of my suffering is that space is the feeling, oh, sorry. I understand that a lot of my suffering in that space is the feeling, the absence of Sīla, and what that triggers in me. Can you speak to ways of practicing compassionate action and speech in environments that are fundamentally less well or healthy? Sometimes I can manage to step back from triggers, but other times I get swept up in the unhealthy culture.
Mm.
Such a wonderful question. And I think we see this play out in so many different spaces beyond the workplace. So wanted to offer that one to you, Vera, for any reflections.
Yeah, so just quickly understanding the time. Oh my gosh, so relevant. And one thing that we really have to remember is, are we strong enough to hold our ground of goodness, right? If we find that we are getting swept away, right, that means that the current is too strong for us to step in right now, right? So, can we first develop ourselves to have that base to kind of really practice on our own first, so that we are more patient, we are able to react more calmly, more compassionately, when something, not good is happening and unhelpful at work or other environments, right? But the first thing is to look at yourself first. Can I do this in a more compassionate way? And if not, we need to surround ourselves with environments and people that are supportive to us first, right? To nurture that base, that foundation of compassion within us. And then when we're strong enough, right? It's not like we're running away from the other thing. We are actually strengthening ourselves so that we can act more compassionately, more wisely, and have a better chance of it being received and acted on more positively. So, huge question for the world today. That's for sure.
Indeed. Vera, thank you so much for being with us. And all of you, thank you for tuning in and thank you for being so generous and being here and being committed to your practice and these reflections and for being just part of this community and turning it into what it is. So, just a reminder that we are meeting next Sunday as usual, and Bart will be back and teaching next week. So, we'll be continuing with the 10 perfections. And we will open up breakout rooms in just a moment. But first, wanted to see if you have any final words for us, Vera, before you come back again. And if you could offer a dedication of merit for our practice today. And Patty just shared from one teacher to another, you are a masterful teacher. And I second that. Thank you so much for being with us, Vera.
Mm. Well, I appreciate all of your reflections, this building of community together. And I just wanted to, leave us with a wish, right? That all of the good deeds, with all of the good deeds that we've done, we intend to do, may all of these good deeds bring peace, happiness, stability, good health, the ability to grow and heal, to move with wisdom and compassion, to live with ease in the world for ourselves, for our loved ones, for all that we interact with, all who we share this coexistence with. And may all beings receive this good intention, be the recipient of these good deeds, and share in all of the beautiful blessings that we create and will create in the future. Thank you all.